Hello and welcome. I hope that you're all doing well. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at setting up Node.js applications. So I'm just going to get you familiarized with the general idea of how we set up a Node.js application and just get you thinking about what Node.js is and how it's generally used. So to start off with, I'm going to show you where you can get Node.js to install it on your computer. You're going to visit the webpage nodejs.org. And on this web page, the first thing that you're going to see is actually these download links here, which will allow you to download Node.js for whatever operating system you have, and they'll also provide instructions on how you actually complete the installation. In my case, I have Node.js installed on my Windows machine, and that's what I'm going to be demonstrating throughout these videos. I'm going to be continuing to use Visual Studio Code for the purposes of demonstration, just because it has the ability to launch a PowerShell inside of the directory that I am working inside of. So that's just a nice convenient feature of it. So once you have Node.js installed, you're going to be able to start actually setting up and creating Node.js applications. So first off, let's discuss how we can actually create a Node.js application. To do this, in your command line, you're going to type in npm and then init, like this. When you do this, it will walk you through creating your package. So when you create a package, there's going to be a number of different questions that it's going to ask you. And this is all metadata about your application. It's things that will help it understand what your application is and what your application is doing. This sort of stuff exists for a user to be able to understand what exactly your packages are going to do. If you are distributing this to other people, this will help them understand things like the version number and what your actual program is and what it's named. So the first question is package name. This is generally seen as the name of the package, so the name of the program itself. I'm going to leave it as the default. I'm not really going to input any of this stuff because it's not really needed, but I will talk you through what each of these things generally means. The version is, of course, the version of the application. Version numbers are good to keep track of in case there are updates to your application that are required. So that is something that we can input in. We'll leave it as 1.0.0 since that's usually the first version of an application that will be created. The description will tell a little bit about what your application does. So you can add in a brief description about the application itself. Again, I'll leave this blank. The entry point is the file that is going to be the starting point of your application. So if your application is just run, this would be the first file that will run. It will be the starting point of the application. Typically, we leave this as index.js. Now, all the code for Node.js is typically written in JavaScript. So you will see that it is in JavaScript or some other flavor of JavaScript like TypeScript. So usually index.js would be the main file that you would see as the entry point for the application. So we'll leave that as is. We have a test command, which is used to run tests against the application. We'll leave that blank since we don't really have any tests defined, but this would help you, specify the actual testing commands if you had some sort of testing framework that you wanted to work with. Git repository would be where you want to commit the code to on Git if you have one. In this case, I don't, so again, I'll leave it blank. Keywords are just general terms that help to describe the project. I think that these generally exist for things like if you were to upload this package through like npm manager or something among those lines. Node has these package managers that exist for people to be able to download projects. And if they're searching for something specific, the keywords will help to identify your project. And then we have the author, which would be you, right? Or the company that you're working for. So generally this is the metadata about who created the package itself. And then the licensing. So every application that's open source is going to have a license associated with it. Even non-open source applications will have a license associated with it. This determines the actual use of the application. So who can use it, what they can use it for, and what they're able to do with it. Now, there's a lot of discussion about open source licensing. It's well beyond the scope of this course, but you're able to find good resources on this. There's lots of sites that will explain different licenses to you, and you can pick one that happens to be appropriate for your project. Again, I will just leave this as the default for now. Once this is completed, it will ask if this is okay. You can type in yes. And you'll see that it will create this package.json file inside of our directory. This package.json file contains all of this information that we have provided, and we could change it at any time if we would like. So this is the stuff that describes our actual package. And now with this, we can actually create a really basic Node application. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call it index.js. Index.js is going to contain JavaScript code, specifically Node.js formatted JavaScript code. And what I'm going to do for you here is I'm going to create a simple server that's going to serve content. So the main goal of Node.js is that it turns JavaScript into a server language. So that means that it's able to act like a web server. So what that means is basically when people request pages, typically those requests will go into a web server. The web server then does the work to determine what to do with those requests and returns data back to the client. That's the main idea of what a web server is going to do. So that's what Node.js is going to serve as a purpose in our applications. It's going to act as the backend. When people request data, Node.js is going to process that data. It's going to do something with it, and it's going to return back a result. So that's the main idea of what Node.js does. So in order to achieve this, we're going to create an HTTP server. So we're going to start by declaring a variable, which we do using var HTTP. That's going to be equal to require HTTP. So what this is doing is it's importing a library known as the HTTP library. And what this has is it contains a bunch of code related to creating HTTP servers. You can think of this like creating an object in any other language. So we're creating a reference to this HTTP library, and we can now use all of the methods inside of it. One of those methods is called createServer. What createServer does is that, of course, creates an instance of a server. And basically what this server is going to do is it's going to listen on a port on our computer. And if anyone tries to reference our computer at that port, this server will take in that request and it will do something with it. So because of that, it actually acts as a function, which takes in a request and a response. So what is happening here is we're creating an actual function that acts as a server. So this is the same sort of idea as our JavaScript function. Takes in two arguments, the request and the response here. And what's going to happen is we can take a look at the request, process it, and then we can write a response. And then we can return that response back. Now I'm going to keep things really simple, and I'm just going to create a response. So let me show you how we could do that. We could do res.writeHead. In the HTTP sort of language and protocol, what's going to happen is when you create a response, you have to provide some details. And those details are going to include a status code, which tells the client whether or not their request was successful or not. And you can see the details actually here on the screen. It says it will respond with a 3-digit HTTP code. You're probably familiar with some of them from browsing the internet. 404, for instance, is page not found. So that status code indicates that the page that they tried to access was not found. In this case, we are doing a successful request, which is a code 200. And you can find these code numbers online quite readily. If you look up HTTP status codes, you can see all sorts of different ones. 200 is the most common one in this case for a successful request. Next, we're going to describe what content we want to return back. So content type, in this case, is going to be text/HTML. What I'm saying is I want to return back data, and that data is going to be formatted as text or HTML code. Next, I'm going to write in the content that I want to actually return. So I'm going to say res.end hello world. And what that will do is it will attach to the end of the response the text hello world. So basically what happens is someone makes a request to our server. The server processes that request and it returns back some successful response that says that we have some HTML content we'd like to show you. And the HTML content that we're going to show them is the text hello world. That will then appear on the screen. So that's what's going to happen with this. Now, the last thing I need to do is I need to tell this server what port it should be listening on. So I'm going to say .listen. And I'm going to have this listen on port 5000 since that is one that's available on my computer. It doesn't matter what the port number is as long as it's one that is available for you. Now that we have this, we can run our application. We do that through the command line by typing node index. Once that is done, you won't really see anything print out, but what you can do is you can go over to your web browser and you can go to localhost 5000. And when you do that, it will return back the text that we said in the response, right? So in this case, hello world. So this gives you a basic fundamental idea of Node.js, and we're going to go into more detail about this as we continue on through these videos. So that's everything that I'll cover in this video. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video as we continue to discuss more of Node.js.